corrupt, wicked, violent, evil. These words were repeated throughout our study this week and throughout history to describe mankind. Mankind's sin violates God's character. God is righteous, holy, perfect, and just. This week we saw how God judged the wickedness and depravity of human beings through the flood. Yet we also saw how God provided to rescue Noah and his family. Although today's doctrine, the judgment of believers and unbelievers, can be challenging, even offensive, it should not be ignored. It reminds us that judgment establishes true value or worth. The Bible speaks of two primary types of judgment: punitive judgment and evaluative judgment. Punitive judgments are against believers for their sins. This is the dreadful reality facing those who have not received Christ's sacrifice for their sins. They face eternity separated from God. But punitive judgments are also a warning to sinners to flee to Jesus Christ, the only refuge from the judgment that we all deserve. Evaluative judgments, or rewards, are for believers for how they have served Christ during their lives. They are an encouragement to live in faithful obedience throughout our lives. Romans 14:10 and 2 Corinthians 5:10 say we must all stand before the judgment seat of Christ, whether our works were good or bad. How does the truth of God's impending judgment elevate the beauty of the gospel and your own love for Christ? I have to ask myself, do I believe that God is my judge? If I do not believe God is my judge, I fail to recognize the peril faced by people in my world. I ignore the injustice, greed, corruption, dishonesty, and immorality that does not affect me. I wrongly think I can live for my own pleasure. When I do believe God will bring judgment against sin, I measure my thoughts, words, and actions against God's standards, not my own, not my friends, not my family's. I do not fear my judge. I love him. I know Christ stood in my place and took the judgment I deserved, so I humbly seek the rescue provided in Christ. I am motivated to share the gospel and have a heart of compassion for those who face God's judgment. How can you best present Jesus to all who need to know him? What keeps you from doing so? The reality of God's judgment raises the priority of the work you do for him. What you do matters. Here at BSF, you lead women and children. You provide tech support. You pray for one another. You clean classrooms, empty trash, and vacuum floors. You sacrifice a discussion or your Tuesday morning to volunteer in the children's department. Sisters, your work in this ministry matters. The service you offer God out of worship and gratitude does not escape his notice. Pouring into others is not always easy, but it is worth it. Do you realize the importance of your role in helping people understand who God is and what his word declares? Do you? Let me leave you with this encouragement from 1 Corinthians 15:58. Therefore, my dear sisters, stand firm. Let nothing move you. Always give yourselves fully to the work of the Lord, because you know that your labor in the Lord is not in vain.